So, it was time to start rebuilding Anteria, once we were done with the posing.
Ladies, gentlemen, and heroes one and all, welcome. As always, I am Cosmic, and today we're going to be taking a preview look at Champions of Anteria, the upcoming strategy RPG by Ubisoft. Champions is a brand new IP from Ubisoft that, interestingly enough, had its origins in another famous IP, Settlers. Champions was spawned after a negative beta test for the new Settlers game back in 2014. The game director agreed with the feedback that the game did not really resemble a Settlers game at all, so why attach that name to it and try and mislead potential Settlers fans? Instead, they redesigned much of the game and spawned a new IP. This in turn was probably the best decision Ubisoft could have made. The game feels fresh and alive with a completely new IP. The premise of the game is that three heroes return from their homeland to Anteria to find it overrun with warring factions and banditry. The heroes save a seemingly helpless man put in the stocks by bandits, only to find out that the man himself misled them about them actually being bandits, and they were in fact grunts of a Dark Mage's army. The heroes are then tasked with taking on the Dark Mage's army, as well as rebuilding Anteria one territory at a time. It all sounds a very sordid affair, but in fact the game is filled with humour. It in fact tries a little too hard sometimes to be funny. The story and characters have a certain Fable-style theme to them and humour and charm, and in particular the fact that the game is narrated by the helpless man himself, known as Brian, not to mention that the game's cutscenes are all done in a cartoon-style aesthetic, and it works really well for the overall tone thus far. While the game does try to be a little bit too funny sometimes for its own good, the game is, for the most part, fairly humorous, especially the heroes and their distinctive personalities and the interactions between the heroes. One thing I love is that the heroes aren't really obsessed with doing good, but instead they're more obsessed with themselves and making sure that they have a good fight, and then most funnily they like to strut a good hero pose after, a very similar style to those of us who watch Dragon Ball Z, the Ginyu Squad poses that they used to do. That is basically what they like to do after a good battle. Now Champions actually blends several different genres into one, so there's RPG elements in there, there's strategy elements in there, there's real-time tactics elements in there, and it all comes together to make a really well-executed game thus far, at least in the preview build. The world map gameplay is fairly simple. It is turn-based, and each turn represents a day, and you can attack a territory to expand your own empire, but you also have to defend against enemies who will attack you. Aside from the world map, you also have your own settlement to build, and the settlement gameplay itself is fairly simplistic. It is simply drag and drop the building that you want to build, and it is built instantaneously as long as you have enough resources. There are a number of buildings to build, including resource production buildings like a quarry worker or a blacksmith, and the actual town building itself is intrinsically entwined into the progression of the overall game, but also into the hero's item and equipment progression. This means that as your hero progresses, they are going to need potions for battle, and they're going to need better equipment as they get more powerful. This means that you have to build a blacksmith and a herbalist for potions, blacksmith to build new armor and equipment, but you will also have to unlock the blueprints for that equipment, which is done by Renown, and Renown is something that you get for completing objectives in the world. Town also offers a castle in which you can enter and look at your heroes' various abilities, upgrade them if you have unlocked the various points, and also equip them with different various types of weaponry and armor. While the town building thus far looks a little bit simplistic, I have to say that it is a nice distraction from the main game, and it is a little bit of fun building up your town, seeing it as it grows, expanding into new little sections, and overall it is a nice little element to add to the main game itself. That being said, if you're a fan of in-depth city builders, don't come looking here for it, because you won't find it. Once you're ready to head out into the world and do some questing and kill some bad guys, you head into the world map and select a mission, and then you will be getting hit with a briefing screen that will allow you to select the heroes that you have available, and there are several heroes available to unlock. You start off with 3, and you can only ever take 3 into battle, but you can mix and match as you unlock more and more. As you get into the combat itself, the most important important part of the combat is the elements wheel, and it reminds me very much of how Pokemon works in the element sense. So you have several different elements such as metal, lightning, water, fire, nature, that kind of thing. One always has a weakness and a strength against, and then the others don't really affect it either way. And all your heroes have affinities to certain elements, and all the enemies have affinities to certain elements. So you have to kind of mix and match your heroes based on what kind of enemies you're going to be facing to basically get the tactical advantage. The combat itself is a top-down RPG tactic style, so it's very similar in vein to the recent Pillars of Eternity, in that it feels a little bit nostalgic and it feels a little bit classic, but in the good sense. So it's all real-time based, but you can pause combat and queue up commands to give you the tactical advantage, and it's one thing that this game really does push. It really pushes you to be tactical, because if you don't, then you probably will get punished. If you don't use the elements wheel to your advantage, if you don't put heroes in certain places to protect, the casters or the ranged and put melee up front, then you are going to get punished. And it's one of those things that I really like, because the game does have a good sense of difficulty about it. It's one of those games that is going to be fairly challenging for most people, but for some people they will have to ramp the difficulty up a little bit. But for me, there was a good difficulty curve in there. Things did get progressively more challenging, particularly the boss fights. The boss fights were a lot of fun. They were very challenging. Each boss has its own unique mechanics, and there's a ton of them to be found. One thing I do like is that once you're actually on a mission and in battle, things that you do actually affect the world map gameplay. So for example, if you ignore a boss fight and run away from a boss fight, or completely don't even choose to go on that mission on the world map, then leaving that boss alone could potentially have ramifications for you. Vice versa, if you do side quests on a particular mission, they maybe gain resources for you for your town. That or ignoring them might be a bad thing. It's one of those things that they have little tiny bits of choice and consequences here and there. There's nothing that is massively impactful in that sense, but it's a nice little addition to the game. Graphically, the game looks great. The preview build at least ran great. It depends on how that's going to actually turn out in the full game, because we know what Ubisoft's like when it comes to full launch. That being said, I don't see a reason why it wouldn't run particularly well, and I think the art style is great. I think the sound is great. The dialogue thus far has been fantastic. I really enjoyed the storyline. Even though it's a little bit of light-hearted fun, it does kind of grope you in a little bit, and I think there's a certain charm about this game that just keeps you hooked for an extended period of time. It's a genre that I particularly am a fan of, as you well know, and I think that if you are a fan of games like Divinity Original Sin, Pillars of Eternity, that kind of thing, it's probably worth a look thus far. It will be interesting to see what comes of the full launch, how that changes the game, what content is different, what they add in the game. But it's interesting how they've put the price point at $30, which is fairly cheap for not only a AAA game, but a Ubisoft game at that. A $30 price point is very reasonable at that. Now they have said that they are going to be doing DLC in the future, so you will be able to purchase a season pass if you so choose. I would recommend against that, but that's up to you as the consumer. Overall, however, I have to say that my first impressions of Champions is very good. I think that there are some components of it that are simplistic and shallow, but I think overall as a entire package, it works very, very well, and it's surprising to me that I'm actually impressed by a Ubisoft game at that, but that it's thus far so well executed. It'll be interesting to see what the review build is like and what comes of the full launch, to see if there is any bugs and problems, as is traditional with Ubisoft games. But I have to say that I am cautiously optimistic about Champions, and I think it could potentially be a really, really good game. And I think most importantly, I hope that if the full game on launch is as solid as the build currently in the preview build, then you potentially have a brand new IP from Ubisoft that is well worth a look. And that's it for my Champions of Anteria preview. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Do like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts on the game, and I will see you next time.